1. Sometime in 2020, I think around March before the UK lockdown, me and my cousin were playing Tekken 7 on my Xbox. Out of nowhere, the game crashes and goes back to the Xbox home, and so I thought, oh, must have been a little malfunction. I click the icon to start playing again, and a message that says, "Enter a disc to play this game," pops up. I knew from there that the disc must have gotten stuck and so was gutted, but not too much, as I only play the Xbox when my cousin is around, and also, I have the game on PC. The whole of 2020 goes by, and I didn't and couldn't get my Xbox fixed due to Corona, and I wasn't too fussed on it as again, I didn't really play it. One of my sisters and I tried to get the disc out manually. There was also a manual eject button you could press with something thin, so we used a paperclip. That didn't work, and we accidentally lost the paperclip inside the Xbox. And then we even opened the Xbox up and tried to see if we could access the reader to get the disc out. But we needed specific screwdrivers for that, so no luck there. We eventually gave up, and my sister checked the game case just in case, but no game was in it. Around April of 2021, I decided it's time I get the Xbox fixed, as my older sister was getting married in a couple of months' time, and she was over frequently and family would be over soon to help with preparations, etc. So it might be used to play. I took it to my local electronics experts and told them the problem, disc stuck inside, and he said no problem, it'll be £20. However, if the reader happens to break whilst they're taking the disc out, it'll cost more, etc., the usual. I say fine and leave it to them. I then receive a text that same day from them saying it's ready to be collected and will only cost £20. And so I remember being happy as there was no damage done. I go to the shop and they proceed to tell me that there was no disc in the drive. I was utterly confused. My immediate thoughts were that they were scamming me and they took my disc. They're a trusted company, but I was so disoriented by this, or that they didn't really check. So I asked if they put another disc in, and they said yes, and that it works completely fine. They also found the paperclip me and my sister lost and returned it to me in a small Ziploc bag. I then said thank you, paid, and left. Still confused, and even phoned my sister, who couldn't answer as she was in a meeting, so I texted her everything, to which she then phoned me soon after. I tell her that they didn't find a disc and that I think they maybe have taken the disc, still believing this outrageous hypothesis I made up. I go home, and just to make sure I'm not going crazy, check the Tekken 7 case. And what do you know? The game is there. I remember telling my sister this over text, and she phoned again, also confused, stating that she checked the game case on the night we opened the Xbox app, just to make sure I wasn't being silly. But it really wasn't there. I still do not know what happened. I asked both my mum and dad, even though they never touched the Xbox, if they had maybe seen the disc and put it back in, and they both denied. I then thought maybe a guest or an extended family member came over and saw it and put it back, but then I remembered that it was lockdown, so no one would have been at our house anyways. This really sucked, as it meant I could have used the Xbox for the past year, but didn't. But you couldn't blame me, as I was 100% sure there was a disc inside. I genuinely would have bet my life on the fact that there was a disc inside. I've got several far-fetched explanations, but they're all a reach, and I genuinely believe that I and my family, or my Xbox, entered a parallel universe or something, or experienced memory loss from carbon monoxide poisoning, as these explanations just do not make sense. Explanation 1, the most realistic, me and my cousin were actually playing on my PC. This doesn't make sense, however, as I and him specifically remember playing on the Xbox. We also almost always play on the Xbox when he's here anyways, as it's much easier than getting my laptop out and plugging in the HDMI, etc. And also, I remember the message about entering a disc coming up. Explanation 2, very far-fetched. After a while, out of autopilot, I maybe saw the disc ejected and put it back in the case but forgot. This obviously doesn't make sense, as I would have remembered something like this, even if it was autopilot. Due to the seriousness of the situation, my Xbox potentially being broken. Also, I remembered my sister opening the game case and seeing no game in there. She also opened the other game cases, just in case. I'm not here for an explanation, although if you have one, I would love to hear it, but just to share my story. 2. This happened during Ramadan in 2017, when me and my family went for a vacation in Dubai. My sister chose a hotel where we would stay for a couple of weeks, and everything looked decent. I don't really remember the name of the hotel, but it was a 3 or 4-star hotel, with good food and amazing service. Now to the story. The city was beautiful, and there was so much to do during our stay in Dubai. Me and my family were all fasting, and with that, not much could have been explored, but we still made the best out of it. Our second week of the vacation was a casual day of fasting, and the breaking of the fast was around the evening. My family wanted to go to the city for the night and have fun, but I wanted nothing less than to chill. I'm not a fan of Dubai's heat, and the heat was killing me. Once they left, I got really bored after some time alone in the room, so I left the hotel and wandered around the area, and I really liked the environment. After some time wandering, I went back to the hotel. Once getting in the hotel and greeting the guy behind the reception, I steadily went for the elevator and pressed number 9 to the hotel room. This is where it gets very weird. On the 9th floor, there are 8 hotel rooms, and an air freshener on the right side once you get off the elevator, but the air freshener was gone. Thought to myself, okay, they must have taken it away. As I walked to the room, my door keycard wouldn't open the door, and after several tries, I just gave up and looked around to see if I was at the right floor. Everything, and I mean everything, indicated that I was on the 9th floor. Elevator indication was on 9, all the hotel rooms on that floor started with 9. And I remember looking at my hotel room and seeing the correct numbers on the door. That's when I realized that it was too quiet. So very quiet that hearing the very fabric of the carpet I was standing on was the only thing making a sound. I picked up my phone, and the last message received was from my sister saying, "We're at the hotel room," half an hour ago. But I had no reception on the phone. I couldn't remember if I once lost reception in the hotel, but it happened just then. At this point, I was very confused and somewhat startled, so I started knocking on the door to the hotel room. But nothing. No sound on the other side, no nothing. I started banging, and still nothing. I remember our neighbors and how nice they were, so I went to their door to see if someone would answer, and still nothing. No sound. This is where I panicked. I started banging on every door on the 9th floor, and I still couldn't get a response. At this point, the only thing moving and making sound was me. I placed my ear on every door. All I could hear was abstinence. I felt so alone and wanted nothing but to get back to my family. Then my dumbass thought of the elevator and sprinted my way to it and pressed ground floor. I made it down, saw the receptionist, and I haven't been so happy to see another human like I was in that moment. Went back to the elevator, but this time took the one to the right instead of the left like I did before. Pressed 9, and as soon as I stepped off, I saw the air freshener to the right, and my neighbor leaving their hotel room, while I was making my way to my door. Before using my keycard, I heard my family behind that door, and the happiness it struck me was overwhelming, to the point that I was about to shed some manly tears. Unlocked it and went straight to bed. If it wasn't a switch of dimensions, I don't know what is. 3. In December 2017, we needed to get Christmas stockings for our very first holiday living on our own as a new family of 3. Being that our son was also 1 year old just a week before Christmas, and we had a trip planned to see family, the budget was tight. I decided to settle on some cheap throwaway stockings made of felt that I figured we'd just use to get us through this first holiday, and if they didn't hold up or I wanted something else going forward, no biggie. My husband's stocking had a felt scent on it, with a glued-on snowflake embellishment on the toe of the sock. It was the last stocking of its design that wasn't messed up in some way, other than hanging a bit shorter than the others. I was glad to have found it because it was also the last way I could find a matching set of 3, all in the same style. Our son had a reindeer with scarf embellishment. Mine had a snowman with hat embellishment. Around 2 weeks into having them, my husband notices just one of the spokes on the snowflake embellishment is missing. Thinking our son messed with it and probably got it folded back or tucked behind itself somehow, I got up to investigate. Not only was it not just creased down, I really got in there trying to be sure, to the point I was worried I'd undo the hot glue holding the entire snowflake on, poorly as it was. It was snipped, a clean cut straight across like a pair of scissors. Furthermore, I found the now cut-off spoke on the floor beneath where the stocking hung. We talked about how it was weird it seemed trimmed off, and that it's a bummer because, even for being cheap, they made quite a cute trio. I threw the dismembered piece away because it just honestly was not even worth saving. It wasn't a big enough deal to me. A week and a half goes by when my husband is again the whistleblower. This time he's telling me the spoke is back and asking when I got a new stocking. Confused, I go to grab the stocking and show him closer, since clearly his eyes needed some help. I'm walking over to pick it up while telling him that I didn't get a new stocking, so he's obviously mistaken and seeing things. Sure as shit, it's there. I tug on the piece that we both saw on the floor and both saw me throw away. It's solid, like it was never detached. There's no evidence whatsoever that it was repaired, even though that wouldn't have been possible either. My husband didn't replace it either to mess with me. It was the same short, off-kilter hanging it always had, and was unique to that specific one in comparison to even the others at the store. An error in processing that made it obvious it was the stocking. We still have the questionable Santa stocking, and it has had its complete snowflake ever since its mysterious return. Major event? Maybe not. But the fact it was experienced by 2 people at the same time during both instances makes it interesting at the very least. 4. People, mostly people I barely know but have told my name before, like patients at my job for example, always call me by the same wrong first name. Every single time someone gets my name wrong accidentally, like we've all called someone by the wrong name by accident, the name they call me is always Jennifer. Now I think everyone's first instinct here would be that it's just confirmation bias, and that I only just pay attention to it when the name they call me is Jennifer, and that I disregard the times they've called me by another name that isn't Jennifer. But I took this into account about 8 to 10 years ago and started paying strict attention. I have never been called a wrong name that isn't Jennifer in this time frame. To get some logical reasoning out of the way, my real name does not sound like Jennifer, nor does it start with a J or any other letter that can make the J sound in English, or any other language that I'm aware of. This has happened in multiple different states, so that rules out maybe there's just a girl who lives locally to me that is named Jennifer, and we just happen to look really alike. Strangers that I don't know at all don't come up to me on the street mistaking me for a different person. It's always people who I've told my real name to at some point. Hell, even people who have known me for a short while but long enough to know better, I'm talking over the course of several months, have called me Jennifer. The freaking priest that married my ex and I, who I've known for a year and a half at that point, called me Jennifer when we got up to rehearsing the vow portion of the wedding ceremony on our rehearsal night. Even though our names were written down in front of him, I freaked that he might do the same during the actual ceremony the next day, but he didn't. He called my ex by his correct name. I do not believe that I look like any celebrity I know named Jennifer, and have never been told that I look like a celebrity named Jennifer. I've been told I look like other celebrities, but never a Jennifer. I don't hang out with or work with anyone named Jennifer. Nobody I'm related to is named Jennifer. I have been called Jennifer by people of different genders, different races, different nationalities, different first languages spoken, and from different countries. My real name is a common name, so not hard to remember. The only thing I'm left to deduce is that it's just a huge coincidence that spanned at least a decade. So, what do you make of this? 5. Story. In 2012, when I was 16 years old, me and my, I think, 6 friends went to Thorpe Park, theme park here in the UK. The new ride, The Swarm, had just opened, so of course we were going to go straight there. We queued for about 45 minutes before being sent to the stands. I have no idea what these are called, the things where you stand between waiting for the next carriage to arrive, on the second row of about 12 rows. The carriage ahead had just been loaded with a very large black dude, probably at least 6'7", was placed in his seat. As the ride was about to go, an attendant came over and told this guy he was too big to ride and had to go wait outside for his party to finish the ride. Now, like I said, this guy was absolutely huge, big afro, and basically incredibly memorable. Anyway, after we had been on the ride, I again remember seeing him outside with his friends. They were loudly taking the piss out of him for not being allowed on, basically. Fast forward about 14 months, and we went to Thorpe Park again. I believe it was more or less the same group of friends I went with before, maybe give or take 1 or 2 people. Again, we of course went on The Swarm. We waited around 45 minutes again, and went to the same set of stands again, second from the front, with my same 3 friends who came to my row the last time. As the ride was about to leave, an attendant came over and told a certain gentleman he was too big to ride. As I looked over, it was the exact same person as before. I know for an absolute fact this 6'7" humongous man was the same person. I remembered him distinctly. Everything was the same. The way he climbed out of the chair, walked off and went outside. The only thing I don't remember is whether or not it was the same attendant, as I honestly was so flabbergasted of what I was seeing. I turned to my friends and said, "What the fuck, that's the same guy from last time in the exact same situation as last time." Nobody paid much attention to me, but sort of acknowledged it. Maybe nobody remembered the time before like I did. I kept going on about it for a good few minutes, but nobody seemed to listen or care. By the time we got off the ride, this time he wasn't waiting with his friends. One of the things that I always found odd was the fact that I never remembered seeing this guy in line both of the times I went. 45 minutes wait each time, and I never once noticed this guy standing, where he would have been, like 30 people ahead of me. And trust me, huge afro, 6'7", he would have been easily noticed. Since then, I have mentioned it maybe twice to my friends who were there, and they all look at me like I was crazy or I vaguely remember something. Probably just wanting me to stop talking. I understand this may not be an exciting story for some. I'm just hoping somebody could have experienced something similar. My own assessment is it really was just the biggest coincidence, and it just so happened myself and this guy ended up going to the same theme park on the same days, on the same ride, at the exact same time, in the exact same situation as 14 months previous. But that is near impossible, right? 6. So it was 2008 or 2009. I can't remember exactly. It was around the time that the USA was phasing out antenna TVs, and there was that huge push to get the digital converter boxes. I'm sure lots of you remember this. So, like many people, my family only had cable in the living room, and all our other TVs, including the one in my bedroom, needed the converter boxes. The converter boxes finally come, and I am tasked with hooking them up in my room, my parents' room, and my sister's room. I got them all hooked up, and all is well, the first day. The next day, I noticed that periodically my TV would get a large black box that would appear perfectly centered in my TV, and would take up about 60 to 70% of the screen, and all anyone could see was the outer border. This would happen multiple times daily, and only ever to my TV with my converter box. My parents didn't want to go through the hassle of replacing it, so I just had to deal with it. Fine. Months go by and my best friend would come over and hang out all the time. We would play games and watch TV daily, so he has also seen this strange box that appeared in my TV multiple times a day. Now the news is on, and I remember it was some interview with Reverend Al Sharpton. I don't recall exactly what it was about, but my friend and I both disagreed and were just acting obnoxiously and talking general shit about Al Sharpton, and whatever he was harping on about. It is immediately after the black box takes over the screen, except this time, in white letters and all caps, that box reads, "Shut up," with at least 8 exclamation points. We are both stunned and just immediately stare in silence at the screen. It wasn't subtitles, it wasn't closed captioning, it wasn't an hallucination. Someone somehow inserted those letters on my screen at the exact moment on purpose. Who it was or what the purpose is, I have never known, and it's drove me crazy thinking about it all these years. The message stayed on that screen for at least 2 full minutes and then just disappeared. This was the catalyst for both of us to start our journey through all things strange and conspiracy, and I've never read of anything similar happening to anyone else. We tore apart the converter box later that night looking for any kind of transmitter device or microphone, but couldn't find anything of the sort. Of course, we had no experience with those things, and we were teenagers, so entirely possible something was there that we just missed. I put the box back together and plugged it back in, just waiting and hoping another message would appear or something would come from it, but it never did. Neither of us have ever forgotten about it, though, and we both wish we could know how it happens and why. 7. I usually hop the train to the capital on Friday to visit friends and family. Yesterday was no exception. My friend told me to meet them at a smaller train station today, as he would have been late otherwise, so I took another train there. It was a hot day, so I wanted to fill up my water bottle in the bathroom. In my country, most toilets have a pay machine barrier in front of them. I find that extremely invasive and inhumane, but that's the law. I go in and see 2 toilets with pay machines sitting on top of them, and a spacey disabled toilet on the left, which I went into. I would have immediately cleared it if a disabled person had to use the restroom. Also, I wasn't in there for long, because it was ajar. After I'd filled up my bottle, I hear my friend calling my name. It's a unisex toilet, so I open the door and tell him I'm in here. I see him standing in front of the pay toilets, looking directly at them, and I could tell he was confused. He just kept staring at them, even when I opened the door a bit more and said, "I'm here, in the other stall," in a louder tone. He still just kept staring at the other 2, so I finally got out of the stall and asked him if he didn't hear me shouting. Looking as if he'd just seen a ghost, he first asked me where I'd come from, and then shook his head no, he hadn't heard me, despite the stalls only being about 3 feet apart from each other. He then went on to explain that in all his time living there, he was born here and is 25 years old, he'd never seen this stall open. It was always closed, even when a disabled person had approached it. Seemingly genuinely uneasy, I tried changing the topic and went on about our day. He later brought it up again, emphasizing how weird it was that I'd gone in there and he couldn't hear me from the short distance, and I agreed. Life's getting strange, but strange is interesting. I'm here for it if it means my guardians prevent me from having to pay for those damn pay toilets. 8. I always just buy those bulk plastic water bottles at the store. I pull out one from my refrigerator and drink from it, and once I'm done, I crumple it up and throw it in the recycling, and grab another one from my refrigerator. I've been doing this for years. I never ever reuse one of those plastic bottles, just throw it in the recycling. As usual, I'm at home, live alone, no pets or roommates or anything. I had taken a new water bottle out of my refrigerator, opened it, drank about half of it. I went to the bathroom, which is in the other room, for about 2 minutes and came back out. Habitually grabbed my water bottle and took a big sip and horrifically ran to the sink and spit everything out. It was the type of reaction you have if you've ever bitten into food and gotten a completely different taste than you expected. I dropped the water bottle as well in the process because I was so shocked at what just happened. The water I just drank had a very grassy, earthy, and muddy taste to it. The remainder of the water in my water bottle was murky brown, and the water bottle and water smelled grassy. I was in shock for a bit on what had just happened. I was just drinking out of this water bottle 2 minutes earlier before I went to the bathroom. I checked the lot number just in case it was an old one that had gotten misplaced in the back of the refrigerator and had just been sitting there for years with the water going bad. But the lot number was the same as all the most recent water bottles I had just bought. Again, I live alone, all my doors were locked. I checked if anyone was in my apartment, but no one was. Like I said, I don't ever reuse or refill my water bottles when they're empty. I have no explanation. I did keep it as physical evidence and had my mom and sister smell it and tell me what it smelled like. They both agreed it was like muddy water. 9. Either I witnessed a portal, or I interrupted something that was supposed to be hidden from the public eye. One day, in the year 2020, I promised to help a friend and make a small delivery by foot. I was planning on walking through a certain street in order to reach my destination, but before I left my friend's house, she said it would be shorter to walk through a different street, so I listened to her advice, which happened to be false, by the way. As I was walking in that street, I felt a very warm feeling that drew me in. I looked at the sky and noticed a beautiful, clear sun shining over the road and washing it with an amazing light. The sun was symmetrical to the road, and the street was very quiet, which I figured it's 2 in the afternoon, people probably taking their nap or something. Suddenly, I noticed a black van standing in the middle of the road. There was a little crossroads ahead of me, and the van was just standing in the middle, so I was thinking to myself, I was just enjoying the beautiful sunlight watching the road for the past couple of minutes. How come I didn't notice the big black van in the middle of it? I wasn't scared, but I was kind of angry that the warm feeling which accompanied me disappeared. As I was getting closer, I tried to see if there was anyone driving the van, but couldn't see anything. I reached the crossroads and was about to cross it when I noticed a tall man standing right next to me with his back towards me. He had a bicycle between his legs and was wearing shorts. I remember his skin looked pale and frozen. And that was the point I got a little bit scared. There were only 10 steps between us, but I figured if I walked towards him, maybe some men with white robes would come out of the black van and... Yeah, too much TV, I know. So I just stood there frozen myself, turning my head left and right to see who will move first. The black van or the pale, frozen man. The street was empty and quiet, and after 5 minutes, a second black van arrived behind the first one, and honked so the first one would move forward, and it did, slowly without having any driver starting it. I remember the sound of its wheels over the road. It made me feel like I was in some kind of a horror movie. And it was time for me to get out of there. As I was leaving, I heard a bicycle passing me from behind. I turned around and quickly saw no one but the same pale, frozen man still standing there. This time I watched him from a different angle, and let me tell you, people always talk about fight, flight, or freeze. Well, I'm talking about get the fuck out of here. The next day I thought to myself how it was very easy to stage a scene of a black van and a frozen man, but probably impossible to stage complete silence. I'm talking about maybe freezing an entire street and a beautiful clear sunlight, so I went there again, day after day, to see if I can get the same warm, welcoming feeling as I experienced that day. What I found was nothing but a noisy street with yelling moms and kids inside their apartments. The sun wasn't even in the same spot, even though it was the same hour, and there were pretty loud sounds of buses and trucks coming from the main road next to the street in question. 10. So this happened about 4 years ago, but me and my boyfriend, now fiancé, remember this exactly the same, and still have no explanation. We had just moved into our first house, and for a layout of the area, when you walk through the front door, the living room, dining room, and kitchen are all one room, and you have a visible view of the sliding glass door that goes behind the back porch when you walk in the front. Out of the side, if you walk through the carport, there is a screen door that also enters the back porch. It was a pretty small house, so walking from the car to front door takes 10 seconds tops. For context, soon after we moved in, we rescued a dog, Athena, a 9-month-old Shar-Pei. We had only had her for a couple of days at this point, and she was not house-trained. She would run if she got the chance to get through the door. There were times I spent hours chasing her down in the neighborhood when she would slip through my legs. She was also very skittish and didn't like interaction at the time because of her former situation. The only way to lock our sliding glass door was to jam a PVC pipe on the track so it couldn't be opened from the outside. The screen door on the porch was also locked, and the screen was higher up, and the bottom part was blocks. Okay, now to the nitty-gritty. We needed to get groceries for our new house, and couldn't leave the dog inside because of the fact that she wasn't house-trained yet. She would pee and poop everywhere and rip everything apart. It had happened once already. It was a cool night and the back porch had a fan, so we put her on the back porch with her food, water bed, and fan going, and went to the grocery store a few blocks away. When we got home, we walked in with the groceries, left the front door open, and had to make several trips to and from the car. Each time we walked out together and walked in together, and each time she was sitting there looking at us through the window, or playfully jumping at the door. Each time I would stop and playfully jump backwards towards the window. Well, the very last bit of groceries we were bringing in through the front door, we both stopped dead in our tracks. She was inside, walking away from the sliding glass door. It looked almost as if she just walked right through it. We both looked at each other confused. We were never out of each other's sight, so neither of us could have let her in without the other seeing us. The PVC pipe was still jammed in the door, and it was tightly shut still. We went to the screen door, and it was still locked. We checked for any holes or openings in the screen and back porch, but there were none. Thinking back, even if she would have gotten out from the back somehow, she would have just ran away. We checked and pondered any possibility, but it just didn't make sense. We still have her to this day. She is 5 years old and is the best good girl ever. House-trained, no longer skittish, and very happy and healthy. 11. While I experienced a time glitch at work last year, in May 2021, it was not my first time-related glitch in the Matrix. My first glitch related to time took place at the library at the University of California, Santa Barbara, during my first year of college. Note, this is a rather detailed composition of my experience. Originally, I had written about it near the time of the event in an email, before forwarding it across several email accounts, then finally transferring the story to my long-defunct online journal, R.I.P. Zanga, and the blog section of MySpace. I finally decided to share this publicly with a few present-day details. I attended UCSB from 2000 to 2004. I barely went out in order to not spend any money if possible, and probably used all the credits on my meal plan for the school year. Quick shout out to Ortega Dining Commons for the takeout meals that sustained me during some all-night cramming sessions. As a bookish student, I spent a lot of time at Davison Library in my freshman year, choosing the floor I would study at with no rhyme or reason. By the end of the school year, I could honestly say that I have studied on each floor of the library at least once, including inside the spectacular Pacific View Room on the 8th floor. Halfway into the first quarter of the school year, in the middle of October 2000, I began preparing for my midterms. I was not the type of person who could study at home, treating my dorm at the Santa Rosa Residence Hall as my bedroom and nothing else. The glitch took place after I had taken my midterms. I had taken 2 of my midterms in as many days so far, and met up with my roommate at Ortega for lunch at around noon. Afterward, we parted ways as he headed for the University Center, USEN, to start his shift at the bookstore, thanks to a work-study program. While I headed for Davidson Library, I entered the library through the Davidson entrance since, at the time, it was the main entrance to the library. Showing my age, as major renovations saw the construction of a new library entrance and wing a decade after I graduated and left the school. I headed for the ocean elevators, a set of 3 elevators with access to all 8 floors for the library tower, and pressed the up button. The middle elevator opened immediately. I stepped inside, turned around, and pressed the button for the 8th floor. After a short wait, the elevator doors closed and I went up to the 8th floor alone without stopping on any of the floors in between. When the elevator doors opened on the 8th floor, I stepped outside the elevator, took 2 steps, and abruptly stopped in my tracks. I was surrounded by the exposed concrete floor slab, save for the elevated tile flooring I was standing on directly in front of the elevator. There was construction equipment and bags of masonry material everywhere, but there were no walls or windows to speak of. Undoubtedly, the place I ended up in was under construction and open to the elements. I went back inside the elevator to see which floor I was on, and the LED panel showed a number 8 with a down arrow. Tentatively, I went back outside and walked straight from the elevators due west towards the edge of the apparent construction area. In the distance, I saw the sun setting slowly, dipping below the horizon of the Pacific Ocean. If you go to the beach to watch the sunset at UCSB over the course of the year, you'll see that thanks to the tilt of the Earth, the sun sets over the Pacific Ocean during the colder winter months, and over the California mainland during the warmer spring and summer months. Seeing the sunset caught me off guard almost right away, since it was not supposed to occur for several hours. After all, my roommate and I had left the dining commons together at about 5 minutes before 1 p.m., so that he wouldn't be late for work. I was further shocked by something else I saw, or rather didn't see. I looked down at the USEN by the campus lagoon and Stork Tower was not there. I mean, there is no way anyone on campus could overlook a bell and clock tower that stands at 175 feet, 53 meters, let alone from the vantage point of the 8th floor of the library. I turned to my right, looking due north, and saw the peaks of the Santa Ynez Mountains covered in snow. As far as I knew, no precipitation of any kind had yet fallen in the Santa Barbara area since the beginning of the school year. Never mind any rain in the local beach areas, and especially not any snow in the local mountains. While I stared at the snow-covered mountains, a small plane emerged from just below my field of vision and gained altitude, apparently taking off from the local airport. After the plane disappeared from sight, I looked down and saw the rooftop of the original 2-story library adjacent to the library tower. I did an about-face and looked due south towards the Pacific Ocean. In the distance, I saw the Santa Cruz Island of the Channel Islands archipelago, just off the coast. When I looked down, I was stunned to find that the 4-story wing built just south of the library tower was missing. In its place were far more bicycle racks than I remember seeing previously, as these bicycle racks extended from the bike path to the edge of the library tower. By the way, I had only been on the 8th floor for about 2 minutes so far, so I was somewhat surprised when I saw the doors of the elevator I took were still open as I turned around. While taking all of this in, I snapped back to my purpose of being there at the library in the first place, and promptly headed due east, for behind the elevators, where the Pacific View Room should have been. Unfortunately, this area was also under construction. I looked over this edge of the concrete floor slab and saw Webb Hall below. Given the distance between the library and Webb Hall, another building could very well fit in the open space. I looked up in the distance and saw the mesa, an expansive neighborhood in the city of Santa Barbara. UCSB is technically in the city of Goleta, but that's a story for another time. The neighborhood diverted my attention for something I was not expecting to see: streetlights. The apparent sunset meant that streetlights were slowly turning on throughout the city as it became evening. I was not going to get caught in the darkness of an apparently unfinished library floor that did not have electricity or lights. Nor did I want to stick around in a place and time that was very different from the one I came from. I headed for the very elevator I took, since its doors were still open, and pressed the one button. The door was promptly closed, and I headed back downstairs. As I made my way down, I had come to the disconcerting conclusion that some way, somehow, I went back in time. It wasn't just an abrupt change in time of day either. I briefly ended up in the past when the library tower was still under construction, while Stork Tower and the fourth-story wing of the library did not yet exist. When I reached the first floor, I stepped outside the elevator and looked to my right. I saw the long passageway connecting the library tower to the original library. Adjacent to the elevators were several payphones as well as a dorm phone. My roommate and I opted not to get a landline for our dorm since we had cell phones anyway. I turned to my left and walked towards the entrance I had just walked through mere minutes ago. To my enormous relief, I saw the current serial's production, which houses printed magazines, journals, and newspapers, and is located on the lower level of the first floor of the four-story wing. Next to the entrance of this section is a staircase leading to the Ethnic and Gender Studies section on the second floor of the same wing. There were lots of people on the staircase going in both directions as I headed for the exit. I looked through the glass doors and realized that not only was I back in the present time, but also the same time of day when I arrived there just 5 minutes ago. As I stepped outside of the library, storing between Gervet's Hall and the music library was Stork Tower. I walked towards the tower and paused upon arriving at the entrance to the music library. I continued looking up at Stork Tower, still pondering what I had seen while up in the library tower. I went inside the USEN, found a table outside a cafe, and studied for my third midterm until 5 p.m. when my roommate got off work at the bookstore. He was surprised to see me, of course. Over dinner, back at Ortega, I told him everything that I experienced just after lunch that day. He was skeptical, but he ultimately believed me, especially because he felt that my earnest recollection of that day's events over the years, we still keep in touch to this day, was the only time he sensed fear in me. This was the one and only such event I ever experienced during my time at UCSB. I've been to the 8th floor of the library tower countless times since until I graduated, but I never went back in time again. I've taken my roommate and our friends there. I've taken my family there when my sister was exploring colleges. My sister ended up going to UCSC. Rather be a banana slug than a gaucho, I guess. I've taken classmates and even a girlfriend there. Sadly, I was not able to replicate my experience of going back in time with any of them. During the elevator rides to the 8th floor, I would secretly hope that the doors would open to a construction site with random but prominent features from the university skyline missing in all directions, only to be disappointed upon seeing the scale model of the university as soon as the elevator doors opened on the 8th floor and, ultimately, a long ago, fully built library floor with a spectacular view of the Pacific Ocean, each and every time. 12. For backstory, I'm 43, my wife is 38, and we live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, near the border with Wisconsin, a very wooded, quiet rural area where not much happens, which is just how we like it. We have no history of mental illness, come from good families, no criminal record, no drugs, but this is the UP. So we are known for our drinking abilities, which hadn't begun yet this day. We had just bought a brand new pull-behind travel trailer, and we were taking it out for the first time that weekend. which was Friday, May 31st, 2019, through that Sunday. It was Thursday evening after work, and we had gotten the RV packed up and mostly ready to go the night before. We were very excited because we were going to be camping with some good friends we had met years ago while traveling in central Wisconsin, where we had both met each other. They had no idea we had bought the new RV, and our plan was to surprise them with it when they arrived at the campground the following afternoon. For reference, all my vehicles, including our previous camper, are old fixer-uppers. Kind of my thing. So we were sure this would be the last thing they'd expect to see parked next to our 20-year-old diesel Suburban, and would be super excited and happy for us. Anyway, I have issues with leaving on time. Anywhere. There's always something, usually several somethings that come up just as I'm supposed to be leaving that all conspire to make me late. It's the universe's way of having fun with me, I think. My wife saw it happen to me one time when we were going somewhere together, and she couldn't believe it. She said, "I just thought you were scatterbrained, but all this random stuff just started happening out of nowhere, and none of it was your fault." I said, "See, that's what I've been trying to tell you." So leaving for this camping trip was one of those times. I thought I was ready to go. Then things started to happen. I'm thinking, here we go. Before I know it, a half hour is totally blown, and I'm frustrated. But the truck is running, and we're almost ready to pull away at long last. Of course, by this time, we'll no longer be arriving at the campground in daylight, one of my specialities. All we need for it is to be raining, and it will be textbook me. Luckily, it didn't. So I go to pull the wheel chock, and it's stuck. At which point I realize the left rear tire is flat. The RV is brand new with 100 miles on the tires. And all it's done for the last month until now is drive from the dealership to our house. Sit in the same spot on the grass in a little field just off our long driveway, about 50 yards from the quiet country road we live on. The first thing I thought was, "No, I need to pump the tire back up." Not thinking there was any severe damage to it, I connected the air pump and immediately began to see the tire reinflating. At some point, though, it wouldn't take any more than 30 psi or so when it needed 65. I turned off the compressor and hear a loud, unmistakable hissing. It was a leak, but not just any leak. It was a 3/4 inch long perfect slice right in the center of the sidewall of the tire at about 11 o'clock. I couldn't believe it. Somebody I thought had obviously come onto our property after seeing the trailer parked there for a few weeks and decided they needed to slash one of the tires. I was livid, but didn't lose my temper since I didn't want to spoil the beginning of what was supposed to be a fun and awesome weekend, camping and kayaking with our friends. I was worried about leaving the trailer there initially and had purposely parked one of my other cars there to make it look like there was some activity by the camper, which is visible from the road. It was out of sight of the house, and that had made me a little nervous. The little town a few miles away is charming enough in a typically Midwestern white trashy, slightly methy way. It's one of those places where most able-bodied healthy adults just don't really feel like working these days, so they don't. In all that free time, they do drugs, steal things, break stuff, and cause trouble. All the while we, in the minority, go to work and keep their Michigan bridge cards full so they can afford to have kids and eat well while we can't. Okay, I'm done with my rant. So, while I'm grumbling, changing the tire, and putting on the spare, I remember I put one of several trail cameras I have around the property pointing right at the camper in case something exactly like this were to occur. After changing the tire, I went and pulled the SD card and put it in my laptop. Sure, I would see someone even if it was at night since it had infrared capability. Nothing. Just us coming and going to and from work, putting stuff in the camper the days prior, and deer. No asshole with a knife, not even a strange vehicle coming down the driveway and turning around. No half-visible blur that could even be a person, while deer set off the camera at night well past the camper. This baffled both of us, so we shrugged it off for the moment and continued to get ready to leave. In typical fashion, it turned out I needed to go back to the house for something else I had forgotten, a couple 100-yard jog down the long dirt driveway through the wooded area. And after that, we would pull away and head for the campground. This is where the glitch and twist in this story finally comes in after all that setup. I'm walking down the driveway where there are trees on either side of the road, just before it opens up into the yard in front of the house. It's darker here because of the trees, but I can still see pretty well in the late afternoon light. In front of me, I see a rabbit hop out and stop in the grass on the left side of the driveway. I remember thinking, holy crap, that's a pretty big rabbit. There are always rabbits around since we live in the woods outside of town, but this one was unusually large. I saw him move a little and twitch his ears like he didn't know if he should stay put or hop away as I approached him on my way to the house. I glanced from the rabbit up slightly at the house for a moment, then back to the rabbit, which was still in front of me and in my field of view. At that very moment, the rabbit disappeared. It didn't hop away. I could see into the woods all around where he was. It was wide open enough not to conceal him. No tall grass, etc., plus it was very quiet and still, and the dry leaves would have allowed me to hear him running away from some distance. The thing is, I didn't see it move at all. It just ceased to be there, as I was glancing back to it. As soon as it disappeared, I stopped dead in my tracks, wondering what the hell just happened, looking and listening in all directions for the rabbit. Nothing. I could hear the noises much further away, like the low, clattering rumble of the Suburban's diesel engine 100 yards behind me. But nothing like a very large rabbit scurrying off through the dry leaves nearby. I'm an experienced hiker and hunter, so I know what things in the woods are supposed to sound like. Now, when I say it disappeared, it didn't fade out or anything. It was like someone just deleted it from the computer screen. Control X, gone, right now. I went and forgot my item from the house and jogged back to the Suburban, where my wife was waiting, remarkably patiently, for us to get on the road. I waited a few minutes before I told her what had just happened with the rabbit. She believed me, especially after all the weird glitchy things that have happened to us in the last few years. We have started just taking these incidences in stride, and sometimes just laughing them off. In my wife's words, someone went to click hop and accidentally clicked delete instead. This isn't even one of the weirder ones. Those involve lost time and lots of it. For now, nothing bad has happened to any of us at these times. At worst, it just creeps us out and frustrates us. As for the tire, I don't feel that was very glitchy, and I have no reason to believe it had anything to do with the rabbit. Unless it was just the universe again, other than keeping me around long enough to have seen it. The rabbit thing was next level weird, just winking out of existence like that right in front of me. I'd ask if anyone else had this kind of experience, but I've been listening to a lot of these glitch videos, and this seems to be a common theme. I recall the Glitch Monthly where a crow flew behind a light pole and just never came out the other side. That's what this was like, except not moving. Anyone else have a disappearing rabbit story? 13. My mother lives in a large apartment complex in Queens, New York City. There are 3 co-op apartment buildings, each one about 35 stories. There's a small supermarket in the below-ground concourse. I was visiting Mom for the weekend a few years ago and went down to the supermarket to pick up a few items. This took about 8 minutes. When I got back to Mom's floor from down the hall, I noticed 2 extremely obvious wet paint signs on the wall next to her door on both sides of the wall. When I got closer, I noticed a smell of new paint. I didn't touch the door, though. These signs were completely unmissable. It was not at all possible that I hadn't noticed them before. I'd already made 2 previous trips from Mom's apartment. The signs had big red letters and a cartoon of a hapless painter wielding a paintbrush with a bucket of fallen paint upside down on his head. I called the management office to ask if the door had been painted. The woman looked it up on her computer and said, yes, it was painted the previous Tuesday. It was now Saturday. Just not possible the painters came, set things up, painted the doors and left within the 8 minutes or so that I was gone. Also, the painters didn't just paint that one door, they painted all the doors on that floor at one time. I tossed one of the wet paint signs in the recycling bin and held on to the other one as evidence. Then I got spooked and recycled the second one as well. So this was a very strange case of time travel. I didn't travel in time, the door and signs did. I just cannot figure this out. 14. I'm a playwright, and have attended events at a theater organization in New York City. Once COVID started, they started weekly Zoom meetings online, which I usually participated in. This organization is run by a man with a 4-letter last name. Well, it was 4 letters. I wanted to sign up for an event, so I searched my emails for this name. No hits, even though I'd looked him up a short while before, and was still logged in to the same computer session. I didn't restart or turn off the computer, so I went to the organization's website to get his email address. This website now showed his last name has only 3 letters, the same name minus 1 letter. So I looked in my emails with this 3-letter name, and there they were, emails going back months, with this new name. It's not like he decided to change his name and henceforth new emails showed it. I mean that emails from previous months were different now. I keep in touch with some of the other playwrights by phone and email. I asked all of them, do you remember that name being 4 letters? One said yes, the name used to be 4 letters. Another one said it's always been 3 letters, but he's heard from other playwrights that they remember the 4-letter name. I should mention that once I'd made a pun before this change, because of the 4-letter name. So it's not like I remembered wrong or wasn't paying attention. Clear as bell that it used to be 4 letters. I did send the man in question a message via Facebook asking if other people also tell him his name changed from 4 letters to 3. He didn't reply. I guess he assumed I was pranking him. Or was crazy. 15. Today I experienced a glitch. Perhaps. So I went to the grocery store and bought a dozen eggs. I always check my eggs first because I don't want to bring home broken eggs. Looked at them before I put them in the buggy. There, of course, were 12 uncracked eggs. I get home, and the only people here are myself and my husband. I was planning on making French toast, so I took out 3 eggs. We left twice, came back, and put everything away. Decided not to make the French toast, so I put the eggs back, but one is missing. WTF. I know I only took out 3, and the carton was full when I took it out, so how the heck is one missing? All of my children were gone to church when I came back with the eggs, so I can't blame them. Also, as I mentioned earlier, my husband and I went back out twice, so neither one of us cooked it. The door was locked when we left, so I know no one came in and took an egg, and what sense would that make anyway? I don't know. This has really baffled me. 16. Okay guys, I might have heard the hum. Let me back up though. Around 8 or so years ago before I moved, I used to record for YouTube out of my closet. It was one of those spacious walk-ins. I joked about being able to fit a computer desk in there, so I did. I started out recording facing the long way into the closet, then by October I rotated my desk the short way for more arm space. I was in the middle of recording. I cannot recall which game I was playing. I heard what sounded like a jet engine, so I went and closed the window to block out the sound. Not even a few minutes in, I notice that I can still hear the sound. Keep in mind, though, that I can hear this over the game. Through my noise-cancelling headphones and a closed window. Confused, I go back to the window to try and figure out why I can still hear this. Is the noise coming from my laptop? God, please no. I cannot afford for my laptop to die on me. Nope, not the laptop. The fan, then. I turn off the fan. Not the fan. Is it in my head? I close the skin flaps over my ear holes. That blocks the sound. It's outside of my head. This is when I realize that the sound is still going. If it was a jet, it should have stopped by now. But the sound keeps growing louder and louder. I decide to ignore it and continue recording. After all, this would make an interesting video. Now herein lies the full glitch part of my story. When this hum happened, I was recording the long way of my office. When October came around, I did my first Halloween-themed month for my channel. By the time the month ended, I was all caught up with the videos I recorded beforehand. I was going to leave in the part where I was investigating the humming sound in my video, because it was going to be interesting. When I told my friend Ink about this, he suggested I use that video and investigate other hum experiences and make a video of it. He is the one that suggested it was the hum to begin with. Fast forward a few months. I had moved down to Pennsylvania to be with my fiancée, and soon after that, the hard drive that contained some of the videos that was still needed to be edited took a dump on me. I still have not recovered it. Now, logic dictates that I should have edited the video with the hum already. I cannot find said video on my channel. I know, because I am rewatching my old videos to find some highlights for my highlight reel. I know I didn't edit out the hum, because I was going to leave it in. I should have edited it by now, but if I didn't, then it is stuck in my hard drive. I messaged Ink about this, and he didn't even remember the conversation. He surely remembered our previous conversation where I told him I never heard anything like that. Am I going insane? Was I already there? Did I just not edit the video and now it's stuck in my hard drive that I have yet to recover? Did I slip into a universe where I never heard the hum? Am I misremembering this? This whole event has messed with my head, which is one of the side effects of the hum, according to what I've read. Side note, when I brought this up to my mother and brother, whom lived with me at the time, they didn't even hear any jet engines. Which they should have, because the sound was loud enough to override my game noises. What is your guys' opinion? If I get a solid reasoning, then I can feel a little better. 17. My first glitch in the Matrix. I was fixing supper yesterday evening, complete with homemade mashed potatoes, both of my toddler's favorite side dishes. I got my milk out of the fridge to add to the potatoes and found there was very little in the jug. Fortunately, I had enough, and discarded the empty jug in the garbage while making a mental note to buy more milk the next day. I never keep more than one jug of milk at a time. I've been like that my whole adulthood due to trauma as a child of grabbing a jug out of the fridge, pouring a big glass full, and taking a huge gulp of nasty spoiled milk. But that could be a story all in itself. Back to today. Had a very chaotic half-day at work and dental appointment afterwards. Getting stuck in rush hour traffic, getting home late, starting supper for the family late, making homemade mac and cheese to go with tonight's supper. In cooking mode in my brain, so I go to grab milk to add to the mac and cheese, completely not realizing I had forgotten to buy milk after work. Pour it in the mix, go to put the jug of milk back in its usual place in said fridge. Stop dead in my tracks. And I mean I was in full supermom mode cooking dinner. It's like when the players in Squid Games were trying to reach the finish line alive. I then realize in my hand is a completely full gallon of milk. I stand there for several moments just looking at the milk jug, instantly replaying in my head the day's events. Was I so into my supermom mode that I don't remember going to the store and purchasing a gallon of the milk? I replay it over and over. But no, I am absolutely positive that I did not purchase milk because I just downright forgot to. I snap out of my confused state and return to getting supper ready. Now, my father lives right next to me. I ask him every evening if he wants to come and eat supper with me and his grandbabies. Sometimes he comes and sometimes he doesn't. He did just so happen to come that evening. So after supper, we were still sitting at the table, just talking about different things, when I remembered the milk incident. So, just out of curiosity, I asked him if by some odd out-of-the-blue chance, did he bring a gallon of milk to my house and put it in the fridge? He does in fact have a key to my home, just in case. He responded with a no. I was busy in the garage all day. He did step out of the garage when I pulled into my driveway to wave and say hello. So I asked him if he remembers seeing me packing anything in with me. I wanted to make sure I wasn't so scatterbrained that day that I simply forgot that I bought the milk. He says no, and that he knows for a fact I was only carrying my purse because I changed from one arm to the other so I could wave back and shout a hello, Dad. Chills ran through my arms and legs, and I know that was a glitch in the Matrix. 18. Picture it, Kentucky, 2017. I was trying to get a surgery that was medically necessary, but also technically elective, so I was required to jump through numerous hoops for a little over a year to prove I was truly deserving of a procedure. This glitch affected the final hurdle, a psychological evaluation to prove I was mentally fit to make the decision and would not be negatively affected afterward. At this time, my medical insurance was willing to cover the surgery I needed, but refused to cover the psych evaluation. I have no idea why, since they covered literally everything else related to mental health. Let's just chalk it up to the US health insurance scam and move along. I was out of work due to a severe back injury and trying to go to school, so I decided to shop around and find the best possible price for the evaluation so as not to break the bank. While there were several therapists consulted, including one that tried to force me into multiple mandatory hypnotherapy sessions at $350 USD a session, before entertaining the idea of a psych evaluation, we'll jump right to the star of the show. I call a number to one of the therapists in town, and I'm told that I will need to have a few sessions with a counselor before the psychiatrist will see me, and then we do the psych evaluation and my insurance would cover the first sessions, but not the final session. The final session will take several hours and cost around $300, which is so far the cheapest offering I had found up to that point. Bonus that this place is literally 10 minutes from my house, so I make an appointment with a counselor, who I have since forgotten the name of, but we'll call him Travis. I remember it started with a T. I then go about my life for 2 weeks until the day of the appointment. I thought it was a bit odd that I never got an appointment reminder, but my town is weird and places don't always have reminder systems. I rock up to the building this counselor is supposed to be in, and there is a completely different company in it. Weird? I blame Google Maps because so much of our town is mislabeled, and proceed to look around as the medical complex is small and there are only so many buildings. I pop into one of the bigger ones and ask the woman at the front desk if this is where I'm supposed to be, and she rudely tells me that she has no idea who I am, no idea who I'm supposed to be seeing, and she can't help me. I then go to the building next door and ask, and the woman at the front desk there is super nice, but tells me it's not her office either. This lady was different in her approach and asked me what office I had called so she could see where they had moved. I explained the situation, and all I had that I was certain was the number I had called. She informed me the psychiatrist I had been talking to used to work in her building, but had moved away years ago, but that the number I had called was from the local hospital. I know I did call the hospital because I had been told they no longer did anything mental health related, but this lady said they still did therapy, and perhaps through a mix-up, I had made an appointment with them and didn't realize it. She called them for me to save me a bit of wasted time. Well, they not only had not heard of me, they also had not heard of Travis or the woman I spoke to when I made the appointment. And further, literally, no one in my entire town could do the psych evaluation I needed. I made the appointment, Their number was in my call history, but now suddenly none of that happened. Who the frick do I talk to? Did I talk to anyone? Did I hallucinate the whole thing? Did I accidentally blip poor Travis out of existence because I didn't really want to have a psych evaluation? I don't know, but it was weird and led to a few weeks of me seriously wondering about my mental health status. But in the end, I did get the psych evaluation for super cheap and got my surgery. 19. We were traveling to the next town over to go grocery shopping, because even with the cost of gas, things were cheaper. To facilitate this, I bought a rather large cooler with wheels and a handle to keep our cold items cold for the trip home, and also make it easier to get things in the house. Work smarter, not harder. When I bought this cooler, it was blue. This particular brand at the time was pretty well known for only having a few colors, blue and black being the most common. In stereotypical goth fashion, I wanted the black one, but they only had blue. And I did not have the time to wait for the black one to come in the mail, so I go home with this big blue cooler, and we used it for months, with no event. After a while, we were having car trouble, so we stopped going in the next town over for a few weeks and also stopped using the cooler. The cooler got stuck in a closet, and we didn't touch it until we got our car running well enough to trust leaving town again. It's a rural area. You don't want to break down because there is a 50-50 chance you won't have cell service, and a 60-40 chance that when you don't have cell service, the closest phone is a very, very long walk away, and you might be in more danger walking up to a random house. Anyway, it's been about 6 months that the blue cooler has been in the closet when I pull it out to use it again. I did not notice anything at first, but my fiancé's mom noticed immediately. Wasn't that cooler blue? What? No, what? Huh, it was blue. We're both fans of glitch stories, and we're big fans of people like Hellfreezer on YouTube, and we're both a bit freaked out and a bit happy to have a story of our own, even if it was a small glitch. Cut to a few months later. We've accepted our now black cooler and only mention it on occasion. I'm on an outing with my therapy group. Ended up going back to the place with the nice front desk lady for some anxiety issues. Turns out being nice is good for business. And I have the cooler with me. As I'm pulling the thing along behind me, I'm talking to my therapist about my glitch story, and this isn't the first time I've brought this cooler on one of our outings. As I tell her about my magical color-switching cooler, she stops and says, "No, that cooler was blue last week. That's how we knew it was yours when you left it with us after the last trip." We both look down, and the cooler is still black for me, and newly black for her. But she thinks I'm pulling a prank. She calls over one of the staffers that went on the last trip and confirmed her story about the cooler being blue last time I saw it too. I had to show them it was the same cooler by pointing out a very distinctive scuff mark on the lid. It's been a few years now, and as far as I know, the cooler has not had any further color flips for anyone. Time will only tell when it will color flip again. 20. Have you ever seen the movie 23? Each person has a number or word that follows them around, whether they know it or not. However, this number not only has a dark backstory to it, but I absorbed it from my friend JJ. I first learned about this number when I was trying to solve a puzzle event on the website Neopets. I found one of their secret rooms that had numbers on the floor. JJ, Zephyr, and I were trying to figure out what these numbers mean. Zephyr was combing the site to try and find a new link that has a code of some kind, while I was trying to figure out if the numbers had something to do with math. I added them all up and got the number 311. I blurted out, "What does that mean?" when JJ says, "Oh God, no." Thinking he figured it out, I asked him, "You know this?" He shook his head and explained that this number follows him everywhere. I looked at him funny, and he explains, "Since I was told what this number means, I've seen it everywhere. I would look at the clock, it would be 3:11. I add things together, I get 311 or something similar. I asked him to explain what the number means. He takes the paper and writes as he talks. Okay, so 311 is 311s, right? The 11th number is K, so if you have 3 of them... My God, I interrupted. 311 coincidentally stands for a group of white supremacists. And now the number follows me. One day we showed up at JJ's house to get him to go somewhere. While sleepy, he states, No, what time is it? I go to say it's fine sleeping in, but right when he looks at the clock, the time rolls over to 3:11. I mean it. If he looked 1 second sooner, it would have been 3:10. No, he exclaims in irony. However, this experience with the 311 travels into the paranormal. Years later, after I got married and lived in this huge house with Zephyr, we started to have problems with sleeping throughout the night. Both Zephyr and I kept waking up at 3:11 a.m. on the dot. Zephyr and I were talking about the coincidence of both of us waking up at the same time every night. So, to occupy ourselves, we watched TV for a while. On A&E at 3 in the morning, a show called Paranormal State is on. This was my first experience into paranormal hunting shows, and I got hooked. You know the saying that 3 at night is the witching hour? Well, according to the show, some of their events happen at 3:11. The main event that happened while watching the show, however, is while we were watching the episode where they investigate a house that was used for the Underground Railroad during the U.S. Civil War. When they sent their device into the tunnel, our house lost power. While Zephyr and I were trying to figure out what happened, my wife came downstairs. Short story is that she was up since 3:11, and we could not find out what happened. By the morning, we got power back. We told Zephyr's mother about this, who was staying at our place for a while. She too was waking up at 3:11. Later, we found out that the house used to be a funeral home. There were a lot of other paranormal events happening there, but those are stories of their own. The number 311 was the most prevalent inside of this house. And not just to me, but everyone that was there noticed 311 in some form. Papers would fall on the ground, and 3 from one sheet and 11 from another would land somewhat close to each other. I was printing out a small book for class, and pages 3 and 11 came out with lines through them. It even got to the point where we would roll some dice for D&D or similar games, and one die would be 3 and the other is 11. One night I had a dream. It was vague, like cloudy and barely noticeable. The most I could see was a man of African descent standing in the middle of a foggy vagueness. He looked sad and in pain. That was it, just him. But when I woke up, guess what time it was? If you guessed anything other than 311, you're just trolling the screen. I walked downstairs and Zephyr was already turning on the TV. I cannot remember the channel, but they were doing a documentary for Black History Month. For those that don't know, it's when the US celebrates the people of African descent that made history of some sorts. The show was talking about how and why the KKK became a huge cult. That's when it hit me. Could the 311 phenomenon be ramped up in the house because there was the spirit of a guy that was the victim of hate violence? I brought this up to Zephyr, and he too was experiencing some unexplained things that could have revolved around an African man. I wish I could tell you that we found some case-breaking research to bring justice to this soul, or even that we found proof this guy was even haunting us to begin with. But we moved out of the house with more questions than answers. Bugs me to this day that we could do nothing for this alleged poor soul. However, my wife's birthday happens to be March 12th, one day away from being 311. I joke that if it was 311, that would be a deal-breaker. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Glitch Monthly, Episode 22. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. If you could please click on the little bell next to where it says subscribe, and make sure that's set to all notifications to make sure that you get notified when I upload videos. Because I occasionally get people coming to me and saying, "Hello there, Hellfreezer. We haven't seen a video from you in months, even though I upload every day." Anyway, Let's see. I think we have a birthday shouty out to do today. And we do. I think we also have an Instagram shouty out. Let's see. Yes, we do. The author of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, the author of story number 7, I believe. That was the one with the bathroom glitch. I have a little link to their Instagram page, so click along and have a look-see. They are also a surrealist artist, and you can contact them for commissions. Good stuff. Right, now we have a birthday shout-out. Let's see. And today's shout-out goes to Jamie, also known as Mathematica. Mathematica is one of my biggest supporters on the Twitters. They're always sharing and retweeting my stuff on there, helping get the word out, and that's very much appreciated. Now let's see. And they are 56 years old today. Now, to answer your question, I have considered turning my stories into a podcast. I just need to work out the logistics of it because I really don't know how to go about it. And I don't know if I can get on Spotify, but I will look into it. But in the meantime, as is tradition here, as your birthday falls later in the week, you're allowed to celebrate right through to next midnight, 11:59 and 59 seconds next Wednesday. Okay, just to make sure you get the full week. Right, now before we go, I'd like to sing happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jamie. Happy birthday to you. Alrighty, and I think we'll wrap things up there for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.